want to give you a couple of different examples of different origin stories and why they make a difference. First, I should say, just so you know, I am someone who have always been interested in religion and mythology, and so I was always interested in creation stories. And I wasn't, but I thought they were like really cool. I liked listening to them. I didn't understand like how important they were. I didn't understand them as like a somatic experience until some of my own origin stories started getting really actively challenged. And then that's what kind of helped me realize, oh my goodness, this is like, there's not just like a cool story that someone wrote somewhere in a book. It's not just a story that's been passed down orally from different generations. I kind of knew that intellectually, but they also, origin stories are in our bodies and they're in our relationships with one another. They actually are part of what helps shape relationality. And that's part of why they're so powerful in identity and culture formation. So it's like, big abstract idea there. We're going to kind of give a couple of examples to tease that out some. I think one of the early origin stories that I saw as being really important was actually my mother. So my mother grew up in Stockton, California. It's a flatlands out there right next to the Delta. And she did not grow up, so my mother did not grow up knowing her biological father. And her mother, my grandmother, refused to tell my mother any information about her biological father. She had married another man by the time my mother was 2 or 3, so my mother grew up with a very steady father in her life, and she had a very strong sense of having a father, but it was not her biological father, and she knew it. It was very clear. It was like, no, there's no question. She remembered her mother's wedding to this man. And so for many years, when my mother was a child, her mother refused to tell her about her father. And she just thought that that was how it was going to be. And then one day when she was about 12 or 13, she ended up asking her grandmother, her mother's mother, my great-grandmother, about if she knew anything about this mysterious man. My great-grandmother actually had a photograph of my grandmother and the man that was my mother's biological father. And the photograph had a name on it on the back. And because the two had met in World War II in Hawaii, and so my grandmother had been a nurse and my grandfather had been a pilot with the Dutch Air Force. And they had met and had this very romantic relationship and parted. And so for a long time, for many, many years, for all of her adolescence, when my mother's going through her own identity formation, the only thing that she really knew was that about her father was that he was Dutch and he was part of the Dutch Air Force. And so she grew up being really interested in Dutch and Scandinavian culture. And that interest really shaped her career trajectory and it really shaped her cultural identity. She knew she was half Dutch. And she kind of held on to it. She visited Holland and she made friends in Holland. And she made friends and became part of this larger Scandinavian culture in a lot of different ways. And she always thought, I think her story that she had told herself, that had she been raised with her actual father, she would have gone to Holland and she would have known her Dutch cousins and relatives and uncles and aunts. And she would have grown up speaking the language. So we fast forward till she had me and she decided to do some deeper dive. And she finds her biological father. By the time she finds him, he had actually passed away. But she did find one of his cousins, and so we got to visit the cousins in Holland, which was when I was a young kid at that point, which was really fun. And then she learned that her father had actually moved with his wife and children to Texas shortly after World War II. And because he had heard someone say that, Texas is a great place to live, and he believed them. And so he set up a dairy farm, which by all accounts was not a particularly successful thing for a small farmer to do in Texas at that time. And he never spoke about Holland to his children. He did not let them speak Dutch in the house. And he refused any connection with the country that he came from. This is actually not a super uncommon immigrant story. It's like, it happens fairly often. He wanted his kids to be American. He didn't want them to be interested in Holland. And so fast forward another 20 or 30 years. My mother decides to meet with, she finds a way and she meets with her half-brothers. And they begin to share stories. And they didn't know that she existed. It was a very emotional moment. It was a really cool moment. As she gets to know them, she realizes she knows far more about Holland than they do. She knows far more about Scandinavian culture. She knows far more about that family side of the story, because she had spent many years where that was her only access, was to go back to that Dutch relationality. And she realized that the story she had told, that if she had grown up knowing her father, she would have had this access to this rich culture. But that wasn't true. And actually, had she grown up with her father, or knowing or visiting him and his family in Texas, she would have gotten another version of America in Texas. And she realized that she actually has become the person of that generation of her half-siblings who know the Dutch culture the best and who have the best understanding of that part of the family's history. And that really shifted something for her. Something that had always been a lack suddenly became part of it filled in a gap. And she realized, oh, I've become who I am. And who I am is beautiful. And who I am is really cool. In part because of this set of circumstances that she didn't choose. So that really shifted her own stories that she was telling herself about her relationship to Holland and to her larger family. In this really, really positive way. It was our whole set of things. And so she shifted. She's like, oh, she kind of took away some of that negative edge, some of that anger began to shift. And she kind of became into like, I am who I am because of a whole bunch of different things that happened to me. And I can now carry something for the wider family. And my life has been very influenced by the Scandinavian heritage and a close relationship to Scandinavia in a way that I don't know. We don't know what would have happened if things had been different.